Hey guys, I'm kind of a brat. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, most people that know me or probably already know this about me. What are you like? Are you a brat? I Most people that I know are a brat in some way, right? Needy, right? A brat is needy. Um, know thyself, right? Do I need anything? Do you guys need anything? I don't know. We're going to talk about spiritual law today, right? Spiritual law goes as deep as you want to go. So I want to try and get into the depths of spiritual law, what spiritual law is. Um, Spiritual law is the rules that define the expansion and contraction of the universe, right? Everything is a heartbeat. Boom, 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 boom. So there's an expansion and then there's a retraction. And then there's an expansion and then there's a retraction. And if you look at a picture of the field, it's equal on top bottom. Now, since the first act is expansion or the masculine creative event, on average, there is an expansion because you want to expand forever as um, a creator, right? God. Uh, Without the first act of expansion, and expansion came from the womb, so it was both a masculine and feminine act, but it came from the feminine womb. But the first action, because the womb is an act of stillness, right? Because you're listening to what what was created needs. If there's nothing created, then there's nothing to listen to. So the first act, you have to create the firmament before there's anything to listen to. Otherwise, there's nothing to listen to. And so always think of it in that aspect, right? If there's no expansion, then there's nothing to listen to. And we're just repeating cycles over and over and over. If we just sit here and just, intuitively just listen to everything around us, and never create anything new, then there's no expansion and we're not expanding. So the overall tendency is expansion, but there is the resistance element or the contraction that pulls us back. And a lot of times it'll seem like there's no forward motion at all because the retraction is almost as powerful as the expansion. Not quite, because if it was and nothing ever changed, then we wouldn't want to live in that universe, right? If there was never anything new. Things are constantly changing, right? People are constantly grounding out negative projections and things like that. Um, so there's a parasitic energy involved with any kind of contraction, right? Something has to pull the energy away from you. You know, if you're creating and you're creating into a space like this channel, right? I'm creating into a space. Who knows how many people watch this video in the long run? Maybe 10, 20, could be 1,000, right? It just, depends on a lot of factors. uh, that's people absorbing something that I projected, and then it will have a change in their field. It'll have some effect. Very unusual for it to have no effect. It'll have some effect, right? The things that you guys produce that I witness will have an effect on me relative to my own self-awareness. Let's put it that way, right? Like if, for example, if somebody is projecting a parasitic energy on me, and and if they're manipulating me in the right way, um, and I give them that energy or light. I'm gonna say light. It's so easy to say energy because everybody uses the words energy, but it's not energy, it's light. It's both thought and because energy can't move by itself. It moves with vibration or information or the masculine aspect, thought, light. Um, if you give them your light, then it's a parasitic energy, right? It's the yin yang in the universe, right? You have to have one. You can't have one without the other because if we didn't have one, we would just expand and never receive from anybody. We wouldn't be able to experience each other as separate without the opposite receptive energy. It's got to be there, right? So, learning how to receive without judgment is part of being not having to uh, create parasitic energy, right? Or allow something to feed off of you unhealthily. You can you can observe, right, that a lot of readers will talk about those higher level beings. They call them the observers or the watchers, something that can watch without and experience everything that's going on without actively interrupting the light that's being exchanged, right? That's a very high level being where you will never, nothing ever impacts your thought or emotional state. Because for one thing, once you get to a state where you can recognize the natural growth cycles that are going on around you and not get pulled into the drama of temporary emotional states, then your awareness goes up, right? Because now you're no longer as reactive. Practice non-reactance to the projected light around you because it allows you to be more empathic, to see the bigger picture. If you're reacting to everything, then you're like a pinball machine, bouncing back and forth. And this is where spiritual law comes in. Got to fall back on spiritual law. Spiritual law is just that, right? It's a description of uh, how you're interacting to get a certain outcome. Because if you're always in reaction mode and you're never creating something with the ability to observe in non-judgment, then it pulls you into cycles that are self-destructive. It creates a feeding type energy where you're feeding unhealthily on your environment because it's trying to feed off of you. Negative projections on you, which results in negative projections on other people. And so it creates this feedback loop of just feeding off of each other energetically. Light, lightly. Maybe we could come up with a new word other than energetically. Uh, light. You're just trading the same types of light. And so it pulls you into, because there's an emotional attachment, which has a thought form. It's easy to say emotional attachments, but there's always a thought form that is tied to that emotional attachment. And you may not even realize that that thought form is. It's probably unconscious. It's being held in your field. Um, to tie you to some kind of external action that you maybe aren't happy with, um, pulls you into a lower energetic state because it pulls you out of the center. You're no longer able to watch in non-judgment and then create from a place of non-judgment. Hope this makes sense. Um, so it's just that spiritual law is basically the law of physics, but it's different than because momentum breaks down. You don't, when you get to the quantum level where everything comes from the quantum level, um, unconditional love. That's why unconditional love is so powerful because now you're working from the quantum, right? You're no longer tied to something out there or some other momentum. Traditional physics looks at momentum and speed and all this stuff and stuff that you're observing, but the thing that you're observing is not self-aware. We're in three-dimensional space. it has a level of self-awareness that's very low. And even people on the scale of self-awareness, if we're only using 10% of our brain capacity, right? If that's what's we've measured, that means if we're 10% self-aware, um, we're not really we're getting pulled into unconscious uh, projections of light 90% of the time. We're not we're not in a place where we can observe everything around us in non-judgment and become more aware of what we're producing because of that. And so this is what healing services try to do. The healer tries to make the subject of what they're trying to heal more self-aware because the healer has gone through a process of self-awareness to heal this person. Now, if you don't go through the process, there's you could create a temporary state of awareness in somebody, but unless they've gone through their own process of self-awareness, right? How do they? You really haven't done anything for them. You've created a temporary state in that person. And this is why uh, I've tried my best to, because I know that my own self-awareness has grown over time. There's no such thing as, oh, well, I'm self-aware, so I'm just trying to tell you. It's like, no, growth happens over time. You cannot change the fact that expansion happens over time. And so how do you speed up that process? You can speed up that process by not getting entangled into the negative projections or the positive projections, either or, because you can allow one to manipulate you in a way, right? For example, if I was to, you know, people talk about becoming more magnetic. Well, if I become more magnetic and then um, you know, let's say I start manipulating people's energy because I start attracting a lot of people, then potentially has a negative impact on those people because they haven't learned to stand on their own 2 feet by themselves. They're just attracted to somebody else's energy, and now, and this is why I've been so adamant about just creating cooperative communities. Now, you don't have to partner with everybody. Partner with people that are at least a state where they can do what they need to do for themselves. And if they don't know what to do for themselves, you're working with them. You can advise people. And, I would love it. If I was working with people, I'd love them to give me feedback and say, hey, we need you to do this and this and this. Great. One of the hardest things to overcome, and this is for me personally, is to not see it as a chore, right? If I think about my past and my relationships, how many of those relationships were not chores? Um, I think children can be very fulfilling because it's fun to watch kids learn, and then we don't look at our kids as chores, right? We don't, even though they take a lot of our time and effort, our kids, um, we don't see them as chores. And the real shift is to be able to uh, see each other that way. We're all just kids. And that's been my toughest thing, right? Because you don't want to see the last thing we want to see is each other as a chore. Um, but yeah, because you don't want to have to hear somebody complain all the time. But a kid complains. A 5-year-old complains, when are we gonna stop? I gotta go to the bathroom. I'm hungry. I don't want to eat that. It's yucky. I mean, nobody wants to, for whatever reason, we're okay with our kids complaining. But when we have to deal with somebody else who's complaining, it's like, dude, it's too much. You're not my kid. But are we? Aren't we each other's children? Yeah. If you can get to a place where you can just accept everything that's just the way it is, um, it's a lot easier to be more creative. But then you have to be able to partner with people that can do the same one thing. Because you'll spend all your time trying to ground out people complaining and people, doing this and that. And if people haven't gotten to their real place of peace and acceptance and unconditional love, then you're fighting a losing battle. Because, they're drowning in self-pity and killing themselves and turning. And too much, they're allowing too much parasitic energy to just slowly drain their life force. It's spiritual, right? So everything that we can see in this world is a spiritual battle, and it's really difficult. Eventually, and this is what we're witnessing, and this is why I started this channel, because we're going to continue to witness it, and eventually there'll be a flashover point, and people have to get to a certain place of being uncomfortable before they're forced to do something. It's just the way I'm no different. Comfort level's got to get to a certain place before forced to do something. Um, and it's going to happen for the people that have been, reached their own certain state of fulfillment in their own lives to be able to partner with one another and start building something together, because you won't be able to sell anymore. You won't be able to live off other people's creative energy anymore, right? Therapists, coaches, talking about tarot card readers, all of you guys, there'll come a time when people won't be able to pay for that. And you'll have to start partnering together to start um, being more self-sufficient, because it's this type of feeding energy. Those people that you're trying to help um, need to go through their own process, the same process that you went through. And that's the truth of it, right? If you're looking outside of yourself, then you will never be able to understand the process that you need to go through to do what to master yourself internally. That's why I'm teaching classes on self-mastery, so you guys can, so that I'm at least putting information out there that I believe in, that I understand. Every single healer, coach, whatever, went through their own process of some level of self-mastery that they're trying to teach other people um, through their practice. But those people would have had to learn that anyway if they would have just quit their job, let not let some hierarchical organism feed off their creative energy, so they had no control over their life. Now you have to go through a process where you need to manage yourself and do what you need to do for yourself so you can keep providing and receiving love in your environment. And but eventually, when there's a constriction, you can take care of yourself till so long, but you got to let things get to a certain point, right? You can't just try and force people to work together, because for one thing, they don't trust, they don't care, right? They already have their own momentum, and there is a constriction in the market right now, and it's going to increase this winter. You're going to witness it increase, and there's going to be less people available that can pay you to give them advice. And the thing is they're going to have to look for higher guidance and how to do what they need to do for themselves. If you connect with them in the right way, you can allow them to be supported through that process where you're not overly supporting them. As long as you have the right discernment, right? You have to be elevated into a position of discernment in order to be able to even do that. Otherwise, you just have to set boundaries and say, hey, you need to pay for me for my time if you need me, right? That's what any of you who are coaches, consultants, tarot card readers, whatever, that's what you have done because you understand where you were at in your own journey and how the boundaries that you need to set to make sure that you can help somebody in a way that leads them down a path of self-discovery and doing what they need to do for themselves to be happy, right? But ultimately, none of us are going to be happy until we're working together in a healthy system to create the world that we want to create, which is not happening right now. We haven't gotten there. It's spiritual law. Spiritual law dictates that the organism has to get to a certain place and there has to be a constriction at a certain point to get people to understand that this is the direction that they have to go or they're going to die. Same thing happened in 1929. The stock market collapsed. Small communities had to figure out how to help one another. Somebody was uh, talking. There was somebody that I know who's a coach, and she was making a talking about, don't be afraid to speak up and talk about how, community development and helping people and working together because, which I totally believe in. And so I made a comment. It's like, in my experience, the only thing that I've ever observed where communities have pulled together to help one another that has caused that are natural disasters, right? Huge explosion or a tornado or a flood or some an earthquake. That's when communities pick each other up. But then after that, after everybody's getting taken care of, then it just falls right back into, well, yeah, you got to take care of yourself. They don't keep that momentum of what they learned, right? That they're much happier as a community and much more fulfilled when people start working together towards a common cause. I don't know. And then there's a wonder why everybody seems so unfulfilled. So, and you can get a certain percentage of fulfillment, right, from uh, understanding the the spiritual aspects of what caused people, and being able to, you know, um, there are very high level healing services that we haven't witnessed on this planet because uh, there are non-physical entities that you can block to get somebody to a point of healing, but they still internally have a momentum that you can need to put them down a path so that they can get into a higher energetic state over time. I used the example of Jesus last time. He was never able to get anybody that he knew, including Paul, to the place where he was at because there were things that Paul couldn't do. And they asked him questions like, how is it that we cannot do this? And then it's like, some of these things you can only do through prayer and fasting. You have to get to a certain level of self-awareness and understand the things around you to a level that requires you to get to the deepest places of darkness, right? Because you have to witness it. How else can you heal it if you've never been there? And uh, you have to get to the keys of death and hell, right? Because that's what ultimately it's the fear of death. Oh, you just can't be afraid of dying. You can't die, whether you're afraid of it or not. You just get thrown out in the darkness for a amount of time. Nothing within the field ever leaves the center. It looks like it does, but it just flips back and forth, and it's always coming from and going back to the center. You will never be able to separate yourself from yourself. There is nothing out there. All it is it's different states of awareness. A rock. If you take a rock and throw it through the air, it can't change its momentum because it's completely unaware. Same thing that happens when you manipulate people's emotional states who are unaware that they're being manipulated for profit. Love you guys. I hope some of this stuff makes sense. It's just the push pull of the universe. That's what spiritual law is, and it's happening within us all the time. Uh, when you understand how to practice non-reactance, you'll think a lot harder about how you're impacting your environment, and you don't want a lot of times, you just want to come from a place of this is why I try to do my best to come from a place of neutrality because I just want to give you the facts. I don't want to try and manipulate you into trying to believe what I say. Right? I mean, or you have to go through your own journey. And the only way that you can do that is if you learn to still listen and listen in the stillness. And there's certain places that you have to go that can seem like death. Yeah. Understanding growth, how growth works, right? And then how to get to a place where you can stay in that place. Love you guys. Wishing you the best for each and every one of you, and get rest if you need rest. It's the winter time, so I think we're moving into a season where a higher percentage of the population is going to need more rest. I saw you know, somebody was doing a LinkedIn post. Um, Don Stone. I have a lot of really love her. Talks about how the highest percentage ever recorded. I think something like 79% of employees are unhappy in their work. They're not engaged. It's like the highest reading that's ever happened. It's going to keep getting higher. Those old structures are going to keep falling away. And eventually it's coming to come to a flashpoint because when people don't have, and it gets to a point where you're so uncomfortable that you just have to leave and you don't care whether or not you're making money, then things start to change really fast. And we're getting really close to that. So, and then you can no longer make money as a coach or a consultant. There's no money. The only thing you can do is partner and teach people how to work together, how to surrender to one another, and to create a common goal that's the best for everybody. And that's when real growth really starts to happen. That's when you're going to see the miraculous healers emerge. You're never going to have a miraculous healer out there that charges you money to come see him. You're just going to be grateful that you got to meet that person. And then that's why it's from a spiritual perspective, you want to create and be open to receive. And it forces you to understand things in ways that you never would have unless you go through that process. So, love you guys. Have a beautiful day, and we'll catch you on the next one.